My name is Megan Patrick, 30 years old. If you had asked me 2 years ago what stability felt like, I would have said it looked a lot like my life with Thomas Reed. We had routines that felt safe, Saturday grocery trips, movie nights with takeout inside jokes that belonged only to us. Our apartment smelled like coffee in the mornings and fabric softener at night. I thought that meant we were solid. But love doesn't collapse in an instant. It erodes quietly the way walls fade in sunlight, slow, steady, and unnoticeable until one day the color's just gone. It started with small things. Thomas's smile when he came home from work didn't reach his eyes anymore. His phone, once left anywhere, was suddenly glued to him, face down on the table screen, dimmed whenever I walked by. I told myself I was imagining it. Everyone gets busy, right? Deadlines, clients, stress. That's what I kept repeating until the excuses started tasting bitter. I still remember the first time I saw the name Tara. It flashed across his phone one evening while we were watching a show, just a preview of a message you'd laugh if you saw what just happened. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The way Thomas locked his phone so fast told me enough. Work thing, he said with a quick smile. She's new, in marketing. He said it like that, casual, harmless. But from that moment, something shifted in my chest. Over the next few weeks, Tara, this Tara that became part of our conversations, she was funny, driven a little too dramatic sometimes, but that's just how she is. Every mention chipped at something inside me, even when I tried to act unaffected. One night, I asked, "Do you ever talk to her outside of work?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "Megan, you're not jealous, are you?" "Come on, she's just friendly." That word, friendly. It would later echo in my head like a taunt. Still, I tried to be understanding. I told myself trust meant not policing someone's every move. I didn't want to be that partner, the clingy, suspicious one. So I stayed silent, even when he started going out for drinks with the team more often, even when his cologne changed to something sharper, something I hadn't picked for him. The truth is, denial is quieter than fear. It's easier to tell yourself everything's fine than to admit you're slowly losing someone who's still right beside you. I began noticing things no one else would. The way he'd scroll endlessly, smirk at something unseen, lock the phone again. The way he'd dress better on Friday's shoes. Polished hair, neater sleeves, rolled, just so. And when I asked what the occasion was, he'd shrug. Just in the mood to look decent. You never complain about that. I didn't, but I noticed he wasn't dressing for me anymore. Our dinners became quieter. Sometimes I'd speak and he wouldn't even hear me. His mind was elsewhere, his laughter reserved for someone unseen, his attention rationed like something I had to earn. And yet I stayed. Because love, real or remembered, makes fools out of logical people. When Sophie, my best friend, invited us to her birthday party, I saw it as a chance to reconnect, to remind him we were still us. I wore the dress he once said made me look like I belonged in a painting. I even curled my hair, something I rarely did. He looked up when I walked out of the bedroom. "You look nice," he said, distractedly tying his watch. That was it. No spark, no warmth. Just words tossed into the air like crumbs. At the party, the lights were low and the music pulsed through the room. I spotted Tara almost immediately, tall, confident, laughing loudly in a circle of people. She had that effortless kind of energy that draws every pair of eyes toward her. And Thomas. His entire body language changed the second he saw her. She smiled and waved. "Thomas," she called. Her voice cut through the noise. He walked to her without hesitation, leaving me behind mid-conversation. My stomach tightened. I turned, pretending to listen to someone talking about travel, but my eyes kept finding them. They laughed easily, too easily. She touched his arm when she spoke, and he didn't move it away. The gesture was small, but it said too much. When they finally joined me, Tara greeted me with that polished sweetness women perfect when they already know they're a problem. "You must be Megan. I've heard so much about you." I smiled politely. "I'm sure you have." The conversation that followed was harmless on the surface, but sharp underneath. I watched the way her body angled toward him, the way he leaned just a little too close when he responded. Every so often, Thomas's eyes darted toward me, as if checking whether I'd cause a scene. I didn't. I just smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm. As the night went on, I found myself sitting across the room, nursing a glass I'd stopped tasting. Laughter erupted from their corner again. Her hand brushed his sleeve, and his stayed there, comfortable, easy. Someone turned up the music. Thomas and Tara moved closer to talk. Her laugh was sharp, deliberate, almost performative. And then his arms stretched casually behind her on the couch, not touching, but close enough that everyone could read the body language. For a moment, the noise around me blurred. I felt the weight of it, not jealousy, not anger, just the heavy ache of realization. This was what love looked like when it died slowly. Not in shouting matches or slammed doors, but in the absence of care. He wasn't mine anymore. Maybe he hadn't been for a while. Tara said something that made him laugh again. I set my glass down and stood. He noticed barely. "Hey, where are you?" "Getting some air," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. I walked toward the balcony, the cool air cutting through the noise. The city stretched beneath me, glittering and indifferent. Behind me, I could still hear her laugh his reply and the dull throb of music that no longer felt like part of my night. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like fighting for space. I just felt tired. I stared at the skyline and whispered to myself, I think I already know how this story ends. The night air on Sophie's balcony was colder than I expected. I stood there for several minutes, watching lights blink across the city, my breath fogging slightly in the dark. Behind me, laughter spilled out from the living room, Thomas's voice among them. Every sound pressed on my chest. He wasn't hiding it anymore, not even trying to pretend. I thought about leaving, then calling a cab, disappearing before the weight of embarrassment settled in. But something pride maybe kept me frozen. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of thinking I couldn't handle seeing him like this. So I walked back in. The party was louder now, everyone half drunk, sunk deep into couches or dancing near the kitchen counter. Tara was sitting exactly where I'd left her on the couch, right beside Thomas. Too close. Their knees brushed, and neither moved away. When she saw me, she smiled with that effortless innocence that's anything but. "Megan, come sit." I forced a polite nod and sat on the edge of the sofa opposite them. Thomas barely looked up from his drink. Their conversation continued like I wasn't there inside. Jokes, whispers, bursts of laughter that cut through the music. Every sound of it scraped against the back of my throat. After a few minutes, I said quietly, "Everything okay, Thomas?" He glanced at me, eyebrows raised, the faintest smirk curling on his lips. "Yeah. Why?" "Just asking," I replied. He leaned back, resting one arm across the couch behind Tara. It wasn't even subtle. Her shoulder brushed his sleeve. My stomach turned. I inhaled deeply, trying to keep my composure to avoid turning into the jealous girlfriend stereotype he'd probably accuse me of being. But then he laughed loud, performative. And when he finally looked at me, he said it. "Why are you so jealous, Megan? She's just touchy." A few people heard. Some exchanged glances, half amused, half awkward. Tara's smile froze for a second before she turned away, pretending to fix her hair. It was a moment tiny, ordinary, but it sliced through me like glass. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them loud enough for others to hear, calm enough to make me look unreasonable. I felt the room tilt. That's the thing about humiliation, it doesn't shout. It hums quietly under your skin until you realize you've gone completely numb. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't explain that I wasn't jealous, I was disappointed. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye and said softly, "Enjoy your night." Then I stood, picked up my purse, and walked out. No slammed doors, no dramatic exit, just a simple, clean break of silence. The hallway outside was empty. My heels clicked against the tiles, steady and deliberate. When the elevator doors closed, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. By the time I reached the street, the noise of the party was gone, replaced by the hum of traffic and the buzz of a flickering streetlight. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. It was strange. For so long I'd been holding my breath, waiting for him to remember who we used to be. Now I realized there was nothing left to wait for. When I got home, the apartment was dark. His jacket hung on the chair, his mug still on the counter from that morning. The small domestic details that once meant comfort now looked like clutter from a life that no longer fit. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the faint reflection in the window. My eyes looked tired but alive in a way they hadn't for a long time. My phone buzzed. "Thomas, really? You're leaving because I talked to a coworker I didn't answer." 10 minutes later, "Thomas, you're so dramatic sometimes." I turned the phone face down on the table the same way he used to do and whispered, "I'm done being quiet, just so you can be loud." For the first time in months, the silence in the apartment didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The city outside was still alive, neon lights flickering across my walls. Somewhere Thomas was probably still at that party, laughing too hard at something Tara said. Let him. I finished my water, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The sheets were cool and familiar. The other side of the bed was empty, but instead of aching, it felt like breathing room. As I closed my eyes, I realized peace doesn't come after confrontation. It comes after acceptance. And that night, I finally accepted that the version of him I missed was just a memory, The next morning, the sunlight came through the blinds like nothing had changed, but the stillness told a different story. Thomas hadn't come home. I knew he wouldn't even before I reached for my phone and saw no new messages. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, staring at the chair across from me, the one he used to sit in, scrolling through his phone while pretending to listen. Funny how silence could feel both like freedom and aftermath. I didn't cry. There wasn't anything left to cry about. When love dies, slowly grief feels different. It's not an explosion, it's erosion. You wake up one morning, and the person you built your routines around has already disappeared, even if his shoes are still by the door. 3 days passed without a word. Then, one afternoon, a single text appeared. "Thomas, are we seriously not talking? This is ridiculous." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it without replying. He didn't call. Neither did I. And just like that, the silence between us solidified into something permanent. Over the next week, I started piecing myself back together in small, ordinary ways. I bought groceries that I liked, instead of the bland cereal he always insisted on. I played music out loud while cleaning the apartment, something he used to complain about because it made it hard to think. I cooked dinner and actually sat at the table to eat instead of waiting for someone who was never really on his way home. The bed felt strange at first, too big, too neat, but slowly the emptiness became comforting. I could stretch my legs red until 2 a.m., fall asleep with the lights still on if I wanted to. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It just starts showing up in the quiet moments you stop waiting for permission. A week later, Sophie called. "Megan, I heard Thomas has been out a lot with that Tara girl." I smiled faintly. I figured. "You okay?" "Actually, yes." There was surprise in her silence, then soft laughter. "Good, because everyone else seems to think you should be falling apart right now." I wasn't. Maybe that's what scared Thomas the most, that my world didn't crumble when he walked out of it. Still, curiosity is a stubborn thing. Late one night, I found myself scrolling through social media. I told myself it was harmless. There he was, Thomas and Tara smiling in a crowded bar, drinks in hand, faces lit up by neon signs. He looked relaxed, happy even. The caption read, "Good vibes only, #new chapter." I scrolled further. Another photo, her arm linked through his hand on her waist. The comments were full of flame emojis and compliments. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling for a long time, not because I missed him, but because I finally understood how replaceable I'd been in his version of love. That thought didn't hurt as much as it clarified things. Days became weeks. The world didn't stop. I started running again, something I hadn't done since we moved in together. Every morning before the city fully woke, I ran along the river trail, letting the rhythm of my footsteps drown out the noise of memory. One morning I saw him, Thomas, sitting on a cafe patio with Tara. She was mid-laugh, gesturing animatedly while he stared at his phone, barely listening. The image froze in my mind, her trying to hold his attention the same way I once did. I passed by quietly, my heart steady. He didn't see me. He didn't need to. By the end of the month, I'd stopped checking my phone altogether. I slept better, ate better, laughed more with friends. The more distance there was between me and Thomas, the clearer it became I hadn't lost him. I'd released him. The life I had with him wasn't ending, it was correcting itself. Still, there was one night, a few weeks later, when Sophie sent me a message. "Sophie, you'll never guess what I just saw. Thomas and Tara fighting at the bar, loudly." I stared at the message, sipping tea by my window. The city below was alive, car horns, street lights, a rhythm I no longer felt excluded from. Me let them. That was all I sent. And for the first time in months, I realized something beautiful. Peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits quietly beside you on an empty bed and smiles. It started subtly, the way things always do when someone begins to regret their choices. 3 weeks had passed since the night I walked out of that party, and I had almost stopped expecting his name to appear on my phone. Almost. Then, one afternoon, as I was folding laundry and humming to a song on the radio, my screen lit up. "Thomas, hey, can we talk?" I stood there for a moment staring at it. The words were familiar, almost nostalgic in their simplicity. But my hands didn't move. I didn't open it, didn't reply. Instead, I placed the phone face down and went back to folding shirts. 10 minutes later, another message arrived. "Thomas, things with Tara got weird. She's not who I thought she was." A dry laugh escaped me before I even realized it. I whispered, "You don't say," and carried on with what I was doing. He called next. The ringtone echoed through the apartment too loud for a space that had finally learned to be calm again. I let it ring. When it went to voicemail, I waited half out of curiosity, half out of habit. His voice was softer than I remembered. Tired. Megan, I know you don't owe me anything, but I feel stupid. I messed up. I miss you, okay? For a second, I stood still. There was a time that voice could make me forgive anything. Now it only made me grateful for how far I'd come. I deleted the voicemail, no hesitation. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony looking down at the city below. It buzzed with noise and motion, people rushing through lives that didn't know mine existed. And for the first time in a long while, that anonymity felt peaceful. I thought about how many times I'd waited for his messages before staring at my phone, rehearsing forgiveness in my head before he even apologized, and how different this moment felt now, holding silence like it was something sacred. The next day, Sophie called again. Her voice was a mix of excitement and discomfort. Megan, I'm not trying to stir anything, but you might want to know. Thomas and Tara. It's a mess. I kept my voice even. How bad? Well, she exhaled. Apparently, he's been flirting with other women. Publicly. At work. Tara made a scene at a bar last night. He just walked away from her. There it was, the irony life never fails to deliver. The same man who accused me of jealousy couldn't handle the same game being played on him. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That evening, I went out for a walk. The air was cool, filled with the hum of passing traffic and distant laughter from a restaurant nearby. I walked past a couple holding hands, their conversation easy and soft. For a moment, I remembered what it used to feel like to be touched with care, not obligation. Then I remembered how easily that feeling can be faked. Back home, I found another message waiting. Thomas, you're really not going to answer. After everything, Thomas, I just need to talk to you, please. I sighed and typed a single reply. May, you made your choice. The typing dots appeared instantly, then vanished, then reappeared again. Finally, his message came. Thomas, you don't understand. Tara lied. She's manipulative. I didn't realize until too late. I could almost hear the panic behind the text, not remorse panic. The fear of losing control, of being ignored by someone who used to orbit around his attention. I didn't respond. The days that followed felt quieter, sharper. I started noticing things I'd stopped seeing during our relationship, how the morning light hit my kitchen counter, how the city smelled after rain, how laughter sounded when it wasn't forced. I realized I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I already had it. It came disguised as peace. A week later, Sophie texted again. Sophie, you won't believe this, but Thomas and Tara officially broke up. He looked miserable. Me, of course he does. Sophie, he's been asking about you. I looked at the message for a long time, then typed slowly. Me, let him wonder. That night, as I watered the little plant I'd nearly killed months ago during our last fight, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes karma doesn't come in storms. Sometimes it just hands people mirrors. And Thomas, he was finally looking at his. I went to bed that night without checking my phone, and in the soft quiet of that moment, I knew I had outgrown the version of me that needed his validation. It was a Thursday morning when the knock came. Soft at first, then heavier, more urgent. I froze halfway through buttoning my shirt. The rhythm was familiar. 3 quick taps, 1 long pause. Thomas. Through the door, his voice came muffled. Megan, please. I just want to talk. For a second, I almost opened it out of habit. That reflex to comfort, to mediate, to listen, old instincts still alive somewhere in me. But then I remembered the balcony, the humiliation, the silence that followed. I stepped back from the door, didn't move. He knocked again. Please, Megan, I know I ruined everything. Tara wasn't what I thought. She cheated. Okay, I should have listened to you. You were right. I pressed my hand against the cool wood of the door, not to open it, but to remind myself I could keep it closed. His voice cracked. You have no idea how much I miss you. I haven't slept. I can't stop thinking about that night. There was a time I would have melted at that confession, would have wanted to fix it, to fix him, but not now. Not anymore. The knocking stopped. After a few moments, footsteps faded down the hall. I exhaled slow and steady. That afternoon, I went to my favorite cafe, the little one on the corner with dusty blue chairs and a bell that rang faintly whenever someone opened the door. It had become my routine, my ritual of normalcy. The barista knew my order before I even said it. Latte, extra foam. Exactly, I said, smiling. I found a seat by the window and opened my notebook. The world outside bustled in rhythm. People late for work, kids dragging school bags, sunlight flashing across windshields. Peace in all its ordinary beauty. That's when the bell above the cafe door rang again. I didn't look up right away, but then a shadow moved across my table and a voice said quietly, "Hey." I looked up. Thomas. His eyes were red-tired. His once carefully styled hair was a mess. There was no arrogance left, only exhaustion. He stood there, hesitant, like a child who knew he wasn't welcome, but hoped anyway. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I could have said no, I should have, but curiosity more than sympathy made me nod once. He sat down slowly, fingers fidgeting with the cup in his hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. Finally, he exhaled. "I messed up Megan." I didn't respond. She lied to me about everything. About who she was, what she wanted. I thought she was exciting, but it was just chaos. Noise. She's already seeing someone else. He rubbed his eyes. "I miss how simple things were with you. You were stable. You listened. You made everything feel grounded. There was an old version of me that would have taken those words as a confession, a half step toward reconciliation. Now I just heard the truth behind them. He didn't miss me. He missed how easy I made his life." "Thomas," I said quietly, "you don't get to come back just because someone else didn't want you." His head snapped up, a flash of guilt crossing his face. "It's not like that." "It is," I replied softly. "You replaced me before I was even gone. You humiliated me, and when it fell apart, you remembered I existed." He blinked, looking smaller by the second. "Can't we just start over?" I took a slow breath, watching the way sunlight hit the side of his face, the same light that used to make me love mornings. Now it only illuminated how far apart we'd grown. "No," I said. Just that one word. Quiet final. He flinched slightly, as if expecting a longer explanation. When I gave none, he nodded, half defeated. "I guess I deserve that." I offered a faint smile. "It's not about punishment, Thomas. It's about peace. And I finally have some." He looked at me for a moment longer, as if memorizing the calm he could never give himself, then stood. "Take care, Megan." "I already am," I said, and he left. I stayed there for a while, letting the quiet return. When I finally looked out the window again, he was gone. Just another figure swallowed by the crowd outside. The bell rang again. I glanced up, half out of reflex. A man at the counter smiled at me politely as he waited for his drink. Tall, with kind eyes and a calm posture that radiated quiet steadiness. The barista called out, "Order for Daniel." He turned, met my gaze briefly, and nodded, a gentle hello. Nothing more, nothing less. Something about that small exchange, unrushed, unintentional, felt like the universe's quiet way of saying, "You're ready." I smiled back. When he left, I turned a fresh page in my notebook. The blank paper didn't intimidate me anymore. It felt like possibility. That evening, as I walked home through the soft gold of sunset, I thought about everything that had happened. The heartbreak, the silence, the clarity. Thomas was a chapter, a loud, chaotic one. But peace. Peace was a whole new story. I unlocked my apartment door, stepped inside, and felt it immediately. The stillness, the light,